Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Join the official Telegram channel of Rao's IAS Study Circle to stay updated and get all the materials on the Telegram. The link to the channel can be found in the description box.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading from UPSC Civil Services examination perspective. Today we will be discussing the important news which has appeared in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 9th November 2022, and these are the list of the news for today's discussion. Now let's start our discussion with respect to the Supreme Court judgment on EWS quota and various issues associated or involved with respect to this particular judgment. And here the news appearing on page number 1 says that Nitish, who is the Chief Minister of Bihar, wants raise in 50% cap on quota. On similar note, this news appeared yesterday in the Indian Express, and this says that verdict revives issue of quota for Marathas. So the Supreme Court judgment on EWS has opened doors for multiple possibilities, and one of those possibilities, as you can see, is regarding providing reservation to the local community. And the second possibility is demand for caste-based census. So the Chief Minister of Bihar has been rooting for caste-based census, although the central government has not approved of it. Despite this, the state government of Bihar in June has approved caste-based census in the state. Similarly, this issue of quota for Marathas also becomes important because earlier the Maharashtra government had constituted the Maharashtra State Backward Class Commission headed by Justice M.G. Gaikwad to study the social, financial and educational status of Maratha community. And the commission in its report of 2018 classified Marathas as socially and educationally backward class. And based on this, a bill proposing 16% reservation in education and government jobs was approved by the state government of Maharashtra. However, the Bombay High Court reduced this reservation to 12% in education and 13% in government services, that is state government services. Now, despite the High Court judgment which reduced the quota for Marathas to 12% in education and 13% in government services, a constitution bench of the Supreme Court declared this bill as unconstitutional because it violated the 50% cap set up by the Indira Swani judgment. And the constitution bench of the Supreme Court held unanimously that there was no need to revisit the 1992 Indira Swani judgment, which had fixed the total reservation limit at 50%, and unanimously struck down the state law granting reservation to Marathas. However, the present Supreme Court judgment on EWS has again revived this issue of providing reservation to Marathas. And as of now, the Chief Minister and Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra has said that until any resolution is approved with respect to the Maratha community, the community as of now can avail the benefit of EWS quota. So one thing to be understood here is that there is a shift of demand for reservation from caste-based orientation towards class-based orientation. That is, from social and educational deprivation to economic deprivation. So this becomes one of the major issues which you will continue to read in the newspaper in successive articles. And based on this understanding, the Chief Minister of Bihar has asked for a caste-based census. That is, there is a need for new enumeration of caste so that reservation can be further revised. And based on this, the Chief Minister of Bihar has also appreciated the EWS judgment of Supreme Court and has said that it's high time the limit of 50% reservation was raised. This is because this cap of 50% is depriving the other backward classes and extremely backward caste of opportunities in proportion to their population. And based on this understanding, he is conducting a caste-based census in his state and has also asked the central government to do the same at the national level. However, as of now, the center has not yet agreed on this proposal. Now, another important aspect highlighted in yesterday's judgment was affirmative action which was approved with respect to the EWS reservation. And here the Supreme Court also stated that exclusion of other backward class, scheduled caste and scheduled tribe from EWS did not violate either the Equality Code
or even the basic structure of the Constitution of India. So this exclusion also means that the Supreme Court has also approved this shift with respect to providing reservation from caste-based reservation with respect to Article 15.4 and 16.4 to addressing economic deprivation of individuals, that is class-based reservation. And while providing class-based reservation under Article 15 Clause 6 and 16 Clause 6, the members of EWS community, which has been categorized as a class in itself based on reasonable classification, need not prove either backwardness, that is either social or educational backwardness. They need not prove inadequacy with respect to representation in services or any cadre of services, and they also need not prove any historical disadvantage to their community, because this particular reservation is rather targeted at individual level and not at a caste level or not at a community level. So this shift in terms of reservation purely on economic criteria has also been approved by the Supreme Court. And since this shift has been approved, and also exclusion of other backward class, scheduled caste and scheduled tribe from EWS has also been approved, the limit of 50% can now be breached, as the Supreme Court has also stated that there is no fixed law regarding the 50% limit. So this will raise another set of political demands, especially regarding providing reservation to the local community. And here again, fixing reservation limit will become another set of concerns. And this can be further used or rather misused as a political tool for social engineering purposes. So overall, these can be said to be some of the issues involved with the Supreme Court judgment on EWS, which has approved the constitutional validity of Constitution 103rd Amendment. So this particular Constitution bench judgment was a split verdict, that is, the verdict was in favor of 3:2. The 3 judges favored the EWS reservation, whereas minority judgment was given or provided by 2 judges, and one of them was the Chief Justice of India, that is UU Lalit. So the 3 judges stated that reservation for economically weaker sections of citizens up to 10% in addition to the existing reservation does not result in violation of any essential feature of the Constitution of India and does not cause any damage to the basic structure of the Constitution on account of breach of the ceiling limit of 50%. Now this is because that ceiling limit itself is not inflexible and in any case applies only to reservation envisaged under Article 15.4, 15.5 and 16.4 of the Constitution of India. So this was the majority verdict. However, we must also understand the minority verdict, and this was also given by the ex-Chief Justice of India, UU Lalit. As today, Justice Chandrachud has been sworn in as the 50th Chief Justice of India. So the minority judgment stated that to say that including the poor among those covered under Article 15.4 and 16.4 in the new reservation is bestowing double benefit is incorrect. What is described as benefits cannot be understood to be a free pass, but as a reparative and compensatory mechanism for social stigmatization. And this exclusion violates the Equality Code and thereby the basic structure. So this is the understanding of the minority judgment. And here the minority judgment was also very critical with respect to exclusion of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and SEBC, which is socially and educationally backward class, from the EWS quota. As according to the minority judgment, this exclusion of the community goes against the very fraternity of India. It confines these communities to their allotted quotas and denies chance of mobility. Now, denying chance of mobility means that this affirmative action provided with respect to Article 15.4, 16.4 and 15.5 is with respect to discrimination, or we can say this is discrimination-based distinction based on which the government provides certain affirmative action in the name of reservation. However, reservation to EWS is provided solely on economic criteria, or rather economic deprivation, and there is no historical discrimination to individuals coming under EWS category. So according to the Supreme Court, confinement of these community within their allotted quota denies them the chance of mobility from reserved quota to reservation benefits based only on economic deprivation. And regarding the breaching of 50% quota limit as set up in the Indra Sawhney judgment, the minority view stated that this breach of 50% of quota rule will eat up the rule of equality. So according to the minority judges, this goes against Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, and it allows the government to provide extension of reservation or even providing reservations within reservation by breaching the 50% quota limit. Now, as I already stated, that breach of 50% quota limit will allow the local communities demand for reservation, and state governments might favor such demand based on social engineering, which ultimately suits their vote bank politics. And in this regard, Tamil Nadu has also provided for reservation to the local community, which goes beyond 50%. Now, as of now, this matter is also pending in the Supreme Court before a constitution bench. So let's wait for this judgment also, what the Supreme Court has to say regarding quota provided to the locals in Tamil Nadu, which also breaches the quota of 50%. So these are some of the build-up issues regarding the EWS judgment. Now, this particular topic becomes important both from the perspective of GS Paper 2 and also GS Paper 1. Now, under GS Paper 2, this topic gets covered under Indian Constitution, its salient features, amendments, and also basic structure. Also, functions and responsibilities of the Union and states, and under GS Paper 1 regarding salient features of Indian society and diversity of India. Now, this is a very important judgment, and a question can be asked in the UPSC mains examination regarding the critical analysis of this particular judgment. And in this regard, you need to know both sides of the story. That is the majority judgment, what the Supreme Court has held, which has been discussed by Shashank sir yesterday, and also some of the key issues and debates which will arise after this particular judgment by Supreme Court on the matter of EWS. So a mains question can be critically examine the Supreme Court judgment which approves the constitutional validity of Constitution 103rd Amendment. And this question carries 15 marks. With this, let's take up the next topic for discussion. Now let's move on to this article appearing on page number 7. Now this article highlights about content moderation on social media platform through co-regulation. Now co-regulation here refers to regulation both by the platform, that is social media platforms, and also by the government. Now this article has appeared in the backdrop of the IT intermediary rules and the recent amendment which has established the grievance appellate committees. Now this article suggests that establishing these grievance appellate committees through the amendment tightens government control over free speech on social media platform. Now according to the previous rules, the social media platforms were supposed to have a complaint or grievance redressal mechanism. And if any citizen is not happy with the decisions of grievance redressal mechanism of the social media platforms, then they can appeal to the grievance appellate committees established by the government, and the decisions of the committee has to be followed. So effectively, power has been given back to the citizens to flag content against law or national integrity or against any illegal activities. So regarding establishing these grievance appellate committee, the article suggests that it slides more in favor of the government as it has more chances to tighten government control over free speech, and free speech can be curbed. Now in the era of internet, we know that free speech, especially through the social media platforms, have the ability to shape public discourse. Now this public discourse can be shaped in both positive aspect and also in the negative aspect. So the question remains as to whether these grievance appellate committees which will be established by the government, will they prove effective, and what is the ultimate purpose to establish or constitute these grievance appellate committees. The second aspect highlighted in this article is regarding the aspect of co-regulation, that is regulation both by the government and also by the social media platforms, and in this regard the authors have suggested certain suggestions. Now, apart from this, the article has also suggested to follow certain best international practices, particularly the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act of European Union. And before removing or blocking any content from the social media platform, proper opportunity must be provided and the decision to block the content must be proportionate. So, due process of law must be followed. So first of all, let us go through the purpose of the amendment in IT rules which constituted this grievance appellate committees. So the purpose of the amendment and to establish these grievance redressal committee is that internet and its usage becomes open, safe, trusted,
transparent and also accountable. So it says that the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology has notified the amendments to protect the rights of digital Nagriks. So here it is about the protection of digital rights of citizens of India. Further, the amendment also enhances due diligence requirements and ensures accountability of social media and other intermediaries. So it ensures accountability on part of social media platform. Now, the next reasons to establish these GACs is inaction or action on part of social media platforms, particularly with respect to grievance redressal or with respect to suspension of the account of users. So it says that amendments have been notified against the backdrop of complaints regarding action or inaction on part of intermediaries, that is social media platform, on user grievances regarding objectionable content or suspension of accounts. Now, another reason to establish these GACs is to prevent fake information or misinformation. So it says that intermediaries now will be expected to ensure that there is no uploading of content which intentionally communicates any misinformation or information that is patently false or untrue, hence entrusting an important responsibility on the intermediaries. So it also makes the intermediaries more responsible by ensuring that these intermediaries do not communicate any misinformation or fake information which might have any disastrous effect. And the rules establishing these GACs have also highlighted that intermediaries or social media platforms will have to respect the rights accorded to the citizens of India under Article 14, that is right to equality, Article 19, freedom of speech and expression, and Article 21 of the Indian Constitution pertaining to life and personal liberty. So these are the various grounds because of which these amendments have established the grievance appellate committees with respect to the social media platforms. Now, citizens of India have also been empowered as they can flag any objectionable content or any content which promotes enmity between different groups on ground of religion or caste with the intent to incite violence, any content pertaining to pornography or sexual abuse of children, contents infringing various intellectual property rights such as trademark, copyright, or even patent. Citizens can also flag fake information which can be considered as a threat to sovereignty of the country, and also various misinformation or impersonation of another persons. So all these objectionable content on the social media platforms can be flagged by the users. Now, despite the possible benefits, there have been certain concerns which has been raised by various social activists and NGOs. And the crux of the concerns is that it tightens government control over free speech on social media platform. So it says that the decision goes against government's previous order which called for self-regulation by the companies. Central government can become the sole arbiter or decider of free speech on internet. And this also hampers free speech on social media platform, especially if any content criticizes government's policies. So any criticism of the government policies can also be targeted or can also be flagged as objectionable. Now, tightening government control can create division even within the social media platforms, as a set of social media platforms can be said to be favoring the government, whereas a set of social media platforms can be said to be against government policies. So it says that tightening government control may create division within social media platforms by incentivizing one section to favor government and suppress speech. So this section of the social media platform which favors the government might allow certain speech which may have objectionable content. And this section of the social media platform, even though exercising their right of free speech and expression under Article 19, but if they criticize the government, then such content can be flagged by the users as objectionable. Another concerns highlighted is that content moderation may be subject to the whims of the majority view, as any content can be flagged against sovereignty, integrity, or against nationalist view. Now here it's important to know about content moderation, which basically refers to screening of inappropriate content. So content moderation basically refers to the screening of inappropriate content which users post on any given platform. For example, say if someone has posted something on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, then according to the content moderation policies of that particular social media platform,
If it has been flagged or if it has been reported, then that content is removed from that particular platform. So it says that the process entails application of preset rules to monitor the content which is posted online. And if it does not satisfy the guidelines, then the content gets flagged and also removed from that particular website or from that social media platform. And there are different reasons to remove these contents, including any content having violence, content being offensive, content having nudity, hate speech, or any copyright infringement. So these are some of the concerns which has been raised with respect to the amendments in the intermediary rules establishing the grievance appellate committees. So the question remains as to what needs to be done, and it is here where the content in the article becomes important. So the authors have suggested for co-regulation, that is regulation both by the government entity and also by the social media intermediaries. So it says that there is a need to enact an intermediary law based on co-regulation both by the government and also by the social media intermediaries. So according to the intermediary law, social media content moderation must be done by the social media platforms or social intermediaries under the broad government guidelines. And this moderation by the social media platform not only will ensure autonomy but will also make the social media platforms accountable for their content moderation. And while taking decisions on content moderation or removing any content from the social media platform or addressing users' grievances, their decision, that is decision of the social media, must follow due process of law and must also be proportionate. So these are the two important terms highlighted in this article. That is, even while content moderation or while removing any content, due process of the law must be followed, and the decision to remove or block any content must be proportionate. And in this regard, even government needs to follow due process of law, and its decision to remove content must be necessary and proportionate, or rather it should not be disproportionate. Now an example of disproportionate content moderation can be a content being removed or flagged just because it has criticized any of the government policies or it has criticized any of the Supreme Court judgments. So this can be said to be an example of disproportionate content moderation. Thus, the decision to remove any content from the social media platform must be based on a process which has been provided according to law, and it also must be proportionate. Another set of suggestions is that there is a need to follow best international practices. And here example has been taken with respect to the European Union's Digital Service Act and Digital Markets Act, as they regulates intermediary liability for the European Union countries. So both these legislations have two main goals. That is, to create safer digital space in which fundamental rights of all users of digital services are protected. So basically to protect the fundamental rights of users, and also to establish a level playing field to foster innovation, growth and competitiveness, both in European single markets and also globally. So the DSA and DMA not only protect the fundamental rights of all users of digital services, but it also ensures a level playing field. Further, the author suggests that there is a need for algorithmic transparency by social media platforms to increase their accountability. That is, it means that the algorithm which the social media platform uses must be made transparent, as this will not only establish level playing field, but it will also make content moderation more transparent. Further, there is a need to protect the fundamental rights of citizens, and here the author suggests that we can follow the example of DSA, that is Digital Services Act of European Union, which aims to create a safer digital space where fundamental rights of users are protected and to establish level playing field for businesses as well. And lastly, intermediaries, that is social media platforms, must be provided an opportunity before their content is blocked or taken down, as following these due process of law will strongly secure freedom of speech and expression of online users as well. So based on these suggestions, the author have suggested that having co-regulatory framework, that is regulation both by the government and the social media intermediaries or social media platforms, will serve three main functions. These three main functions are: first, platforms will retain reasonable autonomy of their terms of services, and government need not over-regulate every aspect of their functioning. Now, such autonomy provided to the social media platforms will further promote free speech on the internet. And also because government regulation will allow the social media platform to engage in private censorship. The next benefit of having a co-regulatory framework is that it will help to align government and platforms' interest not only to ensure free speech on the internet but also to ensure a safe internet. And social media platforms can take various measures to tackle misinformation or fake information or any other objectionable content. And having these co-regulatory framework will also allow state to outsource content regulation to these social media platforms. So no longer it will be the headache of the government, but rather it will become the responsibility of the social media platforms for content moderation. And it is also important to outsource these content regulation to social media platforms as they are better equipped to tackle modern content moderation challenges. So, instituting such a co regulatory framework will serve these three important functions. So, on a concluding remark, this article favors co regulation and does not support tightening government control on free speech on internet by constituting these grievance appellate committees. So, as a concluding remark, the authors have suggested that a new intermediary law to tackle modern challenges are needed. It further says that the grievance appellate committees must be done away with because they concentrate censorship powers in the hands of government, and it goes against the idea of free internet speech. Further, a new act is needed, which is Digital India Act is expected to be the successor law to the present Information Technology Act. So the authors have suggested that the government must come up with a new act to tackle the modern challenges. And lastly, the authors suggest that government must adopt a co-regulatory model of speech regulations of online speech. So these are the concluding remarks with respect to the aspect of co-regulation of online speech. So this topic becomes important particularly from the perspective of GS paper 2 under governance and also rights issues. Now based on our discussion, this becomes your practice question for mains. The question is, discuss the challenges pertaining to the model of co-regulating social media platforms. Also suggest best international practices to regulate free and secure internet. And this question carries 10 marks. So I hope after our discussion you will be able to attempt this particular question. With this, let's take up the next article for discussion. Now let's take up the lead article appearing on page number 6, and it is related to counter-terrorist diplomacy or counter-terrorist policy. Now this article effectively highlights that India's push for counter-terror diplomacy has not seen much takers in the international community, and this is because of various developments which has taken place in the last few years. Now in December 2022, that is next month, India will take over the United Nations Security Council presidency for the last time before its term ends for 2 years. And in December, India will chair a special briefing on global counter-terrorism architecture and will also look at various challenges pertaining to terrorism. Now India will also host the 3rd edition of No Money for Terror conference, which will look at tackling future modes of terror financing. And United Nations Security Council's Counter-Terrorism Committee also focuses on new and emerging technologies. Now, despite these conferences and despite various steps suggested by the Government of India at international level, India has not received uniform support from the members of United Nations General Assembly. And in the present circumstances, because of various developments taking place in the world order, including Russia-Ukraine war, including the impact on COVID, and also flexing of muscles by China, the aspect of terrorism has taken a backseat. So let us look into various reasons as to why terrorism has taken a backseat even after United States started the global war on terrorism, especially after the terrorist attack of 9/11. So some of the reasons highlighted here is that this aspect of global war on terrorism, which started after the 9/11 terrorist attack in United States, is almost over despite Taliban taking over Kabul and also entire Afghanistan. And here it suggests that Western countries have also lost the appetite to solve other countries' problems. And considering the drain of wealth of United States in Afghanistan, it decided to withdraw its forces and this was announced by Donald Trump when he was the president of United States. So even persecution of women and minorities in Afghanistan after Taliban took over Afghanistan, this was not looked into by the Western countries. And terrorism taking backbench has allowed Pakistan to go off the hook from Financial Action Task Force. Now this is also because focus of the world presently is on Russia-Ukraine war, and growing global polarization due to Russia-Ukraine war is blurring the lines of terrorism. Further, the United Nations Security Council is also unable to pass any meaningful resolutions which are not vetoed by either Russia or any Western countries, and even China has been able to block as many as 5 terror designations requested by India and United States. Other major issues of the present are use of emerging technologies and increasing weaponization for terrorism, as drones are being used to deliver funds, drugs, weapons, ammunition, and even improvised explosive devices or IEDs. Further, the focus of the world government has increased to tackle future biowarfares or future bioterrorism, and there has been also increasing use of technology to fund terrorism, as bitcoins and various cryptocurrencies are used for terror financing. And terror communications use social media, dark web, and even gaming centers. So the effort is to tackle the proliferation of these technologies to be used for terrorism. So in December 2022, when India will chair the special briefing on global counter-terrorism architecture, it has the opportunity to bring back the focus of the world governments towards the impact of terrorism. Now, strategy to counter terrorism works on three folds. That is on the perspective of security. The second perspective is with respect to economy and also political considerations. So regarding security, it says that purpose is to eliminate terrorist group. It can be done by ensuring proper deployment, modernization of forces, electric fencing on borders, and preemptive strikes as well, as this strengthens the state security. The next strategy is to curtail financing of terrorist activities and also to ensure that funds are not being available to the terrorist organizations or individual terrorists. And the third strategy is from the perspective of political consideration, either through negotiation or by providing amnesty to a group of terrorists. So according to Ministry of Home Affairs, a combination of all these three strategies is the best way to eliminate terrorism. And according to a committee of Ministry of Home Affairs on combating terrorism, it suggested that a comprehensive strategy is required in which different stakeholders, including government, political parties, security agencies, civil society, and also media, should have an important role to play in order to eliminate terrorism. And the elements of strategy to eliminate terrorism includes political consensus, good governance and socio-economic development, respect for the rule of law for different stakeholders of the society, countering the subversive activities of terrorist groups and organizations. Another set of strategy include containing information with the help of various stakeholders including police and media. It further mentions about providing stringent law to fight against terrorists, including a proper legal framework. There is also need to build capacity for the people, and also there is a need to improve techniques of modern warfare such as space training to anti-terror squad and also providing them with advanced weapon and surveillance system. So these are part of the strategy to eliminate terrorism according to the report of Ministry of Home Affairs. Now other than this, Kofi Annan, who was the former United Nations Secretary General, had suggested strategy of 5 Ds to eliminate terrorism. This includes first, dissuading the terrorist groups to resort to terrorism. Second, deny means to carry attacks. Third, deter states from supporting such groups. Fourth, develop capacity of the states to prevent terrorism. And fifth, defend human rights. And other than the strategy of 5D, Government of India has also offered or suggested 5-point formula to counter terrorism. These includes first, exchange of timely and actionable intelligence. Second, prevention of misuse of modern communication systems. Third, building capacities to increase border controls. Fourth, sharing information on movement of persons. And fifth, designation of counter-terror focal points for effective response. So these are the 5-point formula suggested by Government of India to counter terrorism. Now other than this, the Government of India has also been demanding a comprehensive convention on international terrorism, and this demand was first presented in 1986 in the United Nations General Assembly. However, so far this demand has not been met. Now let us understand the purpose, features and issues with respect to this particular demand. So the purpose is to provide a legitimate framework which will make all parties to take binding commitment and safe havens to terrorist groups. The purpose of a comprehensive convention on international terrorism is to create a universal definition of terrorism where all members of the UN adopt this definition in their respective criminal laws. Further, to develop a norm for prosecution and extradition of terrorists and to ban all terrorist groups and also shut down all of their terrorist camps. And one of the important features of this convention is that there cannot be a differentiation between good terrorist and bad terrorist, as it has to be included within the domestic criminal laws of the respective countries, as it also supports for banning all terrorist groups and shutting down terrorist camps irrespective of their country of origin or irrespective of the country in which they are performing. So a country cannot deny the existence of these terrorist camps functioning in their respective country and cannot say that these are non-state actors. Further, there is a need to prosecute all terrorists under special anti-terror laws, and in cases of cross-border terrorism, all the countries of UN must adopt mandatory extradition of terrorists. Now, despite these bold features of this convention, most of the countries are not on the same page with respect to definition of terrorism, as United States wants to exclude the act of armed forces in peacetime. Organization of Islamic countries wants to exclude national liberal movements, and Latin American and Caribbean countries wants to include a state-led terrorism. Other than this, most of the countries are not on the same page with respect to adopting the definition of terrorism in their respective criminal law. Now, despite these challenges, there have been certain progress also, as there is a silver lining, as for the first time, SCO, that is Shanghai Cooperation Organization, has approved the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. The other silver lining is that other than a comprehensive convention to tackle terrorism, 3 specific conventions have come into existence since 1986. These are International Convention for Suppression of Terrorist Bombings of 1997, International Convention for Suppression of Financing of Terrorism 1999, and International Convention for Suppression of Act of Nuclear Terrorism of 2005. So in December, India has a golden opportunity to address to the world governments the challenges which each of the government faces from terrorism, and also the fact that there is no difference between good terrorism and bad terrorism. So this topic becomes important particularly from the perspective of GS paper 2 under international relations and also GS paper 3 with respect to security. Now this news appears in the text and context section on page number 8, and it says that should the age of consent be changed for adolescents? Why are consensual and non-exploitative sexual acts also coming under the radar of the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, that is the POCSO Act, and IPC? What are the ground realities and what have the courts observed? Now this article highlights a very sensitive issue about adolescents eloping from their home. And generally what happens is that their parents files a case under either POCSO Act or under the Indian Penal Code. Now the problem here is that since they are adolescents, hence they are below the age of 18 years. And according to the POCSO Act, child means any person below the age of 18 years. So even though their activity is consensual, that is based on their free will or consent, it will still be punishable under the various criminal laws. And this is what has been highlighted by the Dharwar bench of Karnataka High Court, whereby it has asked the Law Commission to consider this definition of child, which says that any person below the 18 years is considered as a child. Now, why this becomes important? Because it impacts their fundamental right, particularly with respect to their life and personal liberty under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. And if a case of sexual assault or sexual harassment is registered under the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, then it has serious consequences because it also provides for imprisonment. Now let's take up this question asked by UPSC in the prelims of 2019. The question was, which article of the Constitution of India safeguards one's right to marry the person of one's choice? Options were Article 19, Article 21, Article 25 and Article 29. Here the correct answer is Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, as it mentions about right to life and personal liberty. So it's also with respect to the rights issue, this topic becomes very important. And the Law Commission must also look into the matter of free consent even of an adolescent, because this aspect of free consent is also protected under fundamental rights. So the major concern here is that consensual sexual act between adolescents who are below the age of 18 years will be considered as rape under the Indian criminal laws. And this is what the Dharwad bench of the Karnataka High Court has asked the Law Commission to look into. Because under the POSCO Act of 2012 and also under the Indian Penal Code, whoever commits sexual assault on child, now child means anyone below the age of 18 years, and their consent for the act will not be considered. So it says that anyone below 18 years of age can be imprisoned for a term which is not less than 7 years, but which may extend to imprisonment for life. So this can be said to be a very harsh punishment for two adolescents. And registering of a case will also have serious consequences for their future acts. It further highlights that even if the girl is 16 years old, that is, she is eligible to give consent, she is still considered a child under the POSCO Act, and hence her consent does not matter, and any sexual intercourse is treated as rape, thus opening it to stringent punishment. And often the offender are booked under section 366 of Indian Penal Code, which mentions about kidnapping, abducting or inducing women to compel her for marriage. Now this can be punished for a term which may extend up to 10 years along with fine. They are also charged under section 6 of the POCSO Act, which provides for punishment for aggravated penetrative sexual assault, and this provides for a rigorous imprisonment for a term which shall not be less than 20 years along with fine. And they are also charged under section 9 of Prohibition of Child Marriage Act. Now this provision provides for punishment for male adult marrying a child, that is, any girl below the age of 18 years, and it provides for rigorous imprisonment which may extend up to 2 years along with fine. Now, despite the stringent provision of criminal laws, generally the courts do not take stern action. Now, as you can see in 2021 in the Vijay Lakshmi vs. State of Madras case, the Madras High Court dismissed a POCSO case and held that definition of child under section 2D of the Act can be redefined as 16 years instead of 18 years. And the court also suggested that age difference in consensual relationship should not be more than 5 years. So this news becomes important both from the perspective of social justice under GS paper 2 and also from the perspective of rights issue from your prelims examination. Now here let's also look into the laws on the age of marriage as provided in India. So the minimum age of marriage is distinct from age of majority, which is gender neutral. So as we have seen, that definition of a child means any person below the age of 18 years, and it includes both boys and girls. Now the Special Marriage Act of 1954 and Prohibition of Child Marriage Act of 2006 prescribes 18 years and 21 years as minimum age of consent for marriage for women and men respectively. So 18 years for women and 21 years for men. And recently the government is also planning to increase the marriageable age for women to 21 years. Further, the Child Marriage Restraint Act of 1929, also referred as the Sarda Act, earlier provided for a minimum age of 16 years for women and 18 years for men for marriage. But eventually this act was amended in 1978, and it now also prescribes the same age for marriage, that is 18 years for women and 21 years for male. Now talking about different religious laws, according to the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955, it has also set 18 years as the minimum age for bride and 21 years as the minimum age for the groom. However, Section 2 Clause 2 of the Hindu Marriage Acts provides for an exception, as it excludes the application of this act to the members of scheduled tribe because they have their own customs, and according to their customs, they marry earlier. Now, despite these provisions, cases are still registered against the scheduled tribes under the POCSO Act, as they marry much before attaining 18 or 21 years according to their customs. Further, the Indian Christian Marriage Act of 1872 also prescribes the minimum age of marriage, which is 21 years for man and 18 years for a woman. But in Islam, it is different. So the marriage of a minor who has attained puberty is also considered valid in Islam.
So these are different laws regarding the age of marriages in India. So based on these different laws with respect to age of marriage and also with respect to the definition of child, the Dharwad bench of Karnataka High Court has asked the Law Commission to look into the issue of definition of child, which as of now means any person below the age of 18 years. And also there is a need to decriminalize consensual activities between two consenting adolescents. Thus, this article becomes important both from your mains and prelims perspective with respect to social justice under GS paper 2 and also from the perspective of rights issues.